Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy from Down Under, Daydream Deluxe, and today we're going to be having ourselves a history lesson on something that has been in the works for quite a while now. We've seen a lot of videos revolving around Vaporwave and its foundation, but one thing that hasn't been talked about all that often is the origins of this particular subgenre that we're going to be dissecting today. Despite there being a fair amount of videos that have given it a good general analysis, we haven't actually seen anyone dive deeper into the rabbit hole to see where it all began. So I thought I'd do the honor of going all across the web and get as much accurate detail as I could and compile it all into this one video. I'm not 100% on every inch of the most accurate detail described in this video, but I feel as though I've covered the most important facts that we need to know. And if worse comes to worse, I can always make another video to sync up with this one in the near future, but for now, we're going to be focusing on what's happening in this one right now. So strap yourselves in because it's going to be a long trip down memory lane, and I really hope you enjoy this video. So let's get into it. Vaporwave has come a long way since its first conception dating back to 2009 with Sunset Corp's Nobody Here. Thanks to producers such as James Ferraro, Vectroid, and Monotrix Point Never contributing to the first wave of Vaporwave, we have seen hundreds upon thousands of artists from all over the world uniting together to establish their craft. With a vast amount of resources we have instant access to on our computers, all it takes is just a simple YouTube search for a Japanese city pop song, an online audio converter to download the MP3, and a DAW to retexture and transpose the track to a more nostalgic degree. All of the experimentation that has taken place within the community has birthed a myriad of genres at a rapid pace and continue to be celebrated online. And one of the genres that we'll be dissecting today is none other than future funk. If you've been in the scene long enough, you would already know the compositional structure that has revolved around the likes of Super Sex 420, Night Tempo, Saint Pepsi, and Flamingosis, some of whom helped shape the incarnation of Vaporwave's more cheerful and euphoric counterpart. The frequent yet catchy use of an 80s funk or city pop track with all of its excess fat cut from the mix has evolved ever since Barbwalters, EV.EXI, Fiber, and many other names of that caliber stepped in and cooked up some of the most astonishing material we've come to love. But before such producers would break the mold by implementing their own melodies and execute more complex and sporadic technique styles of sample chopping reminiscent of French house, there was your standard recycled looping with a very basic drum pattern at 120 BPM that to this day, we all still have fun jamming on our speakers. While we have a firm idea of how the genre of Vaporwave started out, one question that has surfaced across multiple platforms on the web for a while now is, when did future funk truly begin? Where did the name come from and how did it expand into something more significant as the years went by? Well, before we delve deeper into finding a more definitive answer to where it all started, there is one particular timeline that we need to travel back to. Before Business Casual, Correspect, My Pet Flamingo and DMT Tapes became havens for Vaporwave, there was another label that not only deemed a legendary status for playing a major part in the first wave of the genre, but apparently coined the term future funk. That label responsible was Keats Collective. Founded in the winter of late 2011 in Fort Collins, Colorado, Keats Collective has been held in high regard amongst the community and has since remained as one of the most imperative names to have been involved in the early years of Vaporwave. The label's first set of releases primarily stemmed from its founder Dinosaurus Rex with 4 of his own records: EP, self-entitled, Cosby Sweater, and Pop Information. Soon after, Dinosaurus Rex would recruit a handful of newcomers to Keats Collective with a compilation series named after the label, along with a handful of albums and EPs from Black Jordan, Kev Boss, Box of Wolves, and Crowns. Most of the music at the time had been referred to as disco, hip-hop, and chillwave. However, there were a few tracks listed on Keats Collective Volume 1 that could possibly be considered as some of the earliest prototypes of future funk, including The Extra Mile by Metro and Your Love Is Lifting Me by Occultu. Despite this claim, there was no real verification or an inkling of any kind that solidified the term until March 6, 2013 on Volume 3 of the Keats Collective compilation, where the description simply said, "Future Funk's Finest," which was supposedly the earliest documentation of when this phenomena was phrased. I don't have any conclusion on when the title was specifically invented, but that's as far as I could go as to when it became a category for Vaporwave. However, on the 31st of May in 2013, everything would change significantly for not just Keats Collective or the Vaporwave community, but possibly the whole music scene on the internet. Just on the brink of summer, Keats Collective and all of Bandcamp would be blessed with a particular record from a college student based in the East Coast. This would later become the label's holy grail, the creme de la creme of their entire catalogue that many to this day believe was the prime mover of future funk. That album was Hit Vibes by St. Pepsi. This assemblage of 11 consistent dance floor boppers from St. Pepsi remains as one of Vaporwave's most iconic LPs to date, and has obtained a legendary status with the likes of Macintosh Plus's Floral Shop and Chuck Person's Echo Jams Volume 1. Though mainstream reviews were more than scarce, St. Pepsi's audience and critics showered Hit Vibes with praise for its bright, effervescent cheerfulness, reverb-heavy production, and house-influenced formula. This was not only a breath of fresh air that St. Pepsi had crafted for his career and this new generation of plunderphonics, but everything emitted into Hit Vibes would later have the most palpable impact on the community for years to come. During the time of when the album began to surface across the web, many people were perplexed that despite it being Vaporwave, there was no specific label or subgenre that anyone could think of to classify it as. Considering that it was St. Pepsi's main proclivity in his creative space, there had already been a variety of debates that regarded it as such, while some argued that Hit Vibes was a take on new disco and house music before being officially branded as future funk. Even though this would be dubbed as the initial release that paved the way for the expansion of this electronic microgenre, St. Pepsi had already been experimenting with a plethora of disco and funk samples from the 70s and 80s before Hit Vibes was a preconceived idea. Some examples of how this notion could arguably have been blueprinted for future funk include Challenger, Shaolin, Pineapple Juniors, and We Can Make It. As people were discussing through multiple threads online about the sonic fingerprint of Hit Vibes, another album would appear that same year on Keats Collective's Bandcamp that had taken an approach akin to St. Pepsi's masterpiece. The 6th of November saw Macross 8299's debut, Neo Tokyo, as the next step to help push Vaporwave and its new upbeat counterpart even further. Neo Tokyo harbored an equal balance of the traditional hypnagogic, down-tempo jazzy nature and a groovier, funkier formula much like what St. Pepsi had adapted, but with the use of Japanese city pop tunes. With these two records attracting the most attention from Keats' catalogue, the term that they had used gained more notoriety and recognition from one-time visitors and followers of the label's profile, especially on the new compilation series called the FFF Sessions. This would lead to Keats Collective and the internet to acknowledge this new identity as to what we now refer to it as today: future funk. While everyone was still trying to grasp this somewhat new music genre called Vaporwave that continued to spawn hundreds of albums all over Bandcamp, producers from all over the world would later discover this future funk tag trending throughout the site. It wasn't long before they would carve their own take on this new bouncy genre that the culture had been growing attached to the following year in 2014. The amount of people getting involved around then started to multiply, seeing releases from newcomers such as Roller Girl, Supersex 420, Lancaster, Conscious Thoughts, and many more. With all of these new artists releasing new content by the day, future funk and Vaporwave needed another platform to promote and visualize what exactly it was that we were hearing. One name in particular that was known and held in high regard for the aesthetic that we see in the culture today was by a YouTuber called Arty Music. Before being branded as the #1 destination for unique music, the channel had already been uploading certain songs from St. Pepsi, Esprit, Metro, Luxury Elite, and Mesh. Just about everything in their library consisted of a nostalgia-driven track top up with a looping gif of either a clip that came out of a movie, TV show, or an advertisement from the 80s. While Arty Music had a loyal following between 2013 and 2014 when future funk was still so young, the channel would see an increase of views and subscribers after uploading more and more of what St. Pepsi and Macross 8299 had been composing. The appeal of these artists and their music, as well as how minimalist yet fitting the imaginative finesse of the videos were, would continue to attract more visitors to Arty Music's channel. The audience just wanted more, and some of them even took it upon themselves to craft their own take of this new marvel that they encountered through arty music. With copious amounts of Japanese city pop and western disco songs being chopped, screwed and decorated with basic 808 drum patterns being made by the day, it was time for arty music to step their game up in promoting all of these bangers. There also came the question as to what kind of visual gimmicks could articulate that golden 80s sensation with this new music. What if the imagery of Greek statues, synthetic pop plants and Fiji water bottles just weren't enough to help cement this more upbeat nature of this nostalgia-driven culture? What eventually came to fit the spectacle would later put both arty music and future funk on the map of the YouTube community: the aesthetic of old school anime. Though anime wasn't exactly an uncommon feat that appeared in the visuals of all the Vaporwave tunes that had been surfacing throughout YouTube at the time, arty's frequent use of these clips would later become a staple to the imagery of future funk. The web would soon find countless tracks on SoundCloud and Bandcamp adorned with screenshots, GIFs, and videos from Dirty Pair, Kimagura Orange Road, Urusei Yatsura, Golden Boy, and Sailor Moon. This ploy was ushered by multiple producers such as Z.E.R.O, Young Bay, Night Tempo, and Moe Shop, who would regularly use this trope to promote their music. Since then, we have seen an abundance of Japanese-related media embedded into the genre that doesn't just include anime, but also its language, culture, and even obi strips on the physical media, the latter of which to this day is still a common attribute to physical pressings in the country. You may be wondering, why does old school anime play a part in future funk and vaporwave? Personally, I don't think there is a definitive conclusion as to why we associate something like Sailor Moon with an LP from Z.E.R.O. Maybe because we have seen this trait appear in Daft Punk's discovery with the Interstellar movie, but that's a whole different can of worms that we'll eventually dive into at some point. Some have argued that the aesthetic was only used as an opportunity for weebs to exploit their love for it. However, I think there may be a bit more to it than just that. First and foremost, the nostalgia factor, as we all know, is one of the key reasons why Japanese animation plays a prominent role in the visual aspect of the genre. A lot of future funk contains samples from Japanese city pop that's often served in the same manner as how French house is composed. But the reminiscence of Japan's culture back in the day is kind of presented just from listening to the original piece. Not to mention that a lot of the intro and outro songs we would hear in each OVA or episode would have a very optimistic touch to the final product, much like a Narratus or Night Tempo song would be. Because anime has been considered a major part in Japan's identity in the media and has garnered a universal audience, one of the first things we associate Japan with is their animation. Not because anything displayed in any of the shows resembled the most accurate detail of what the 1980s or 90s was like for them at the time, but maybe because we're so indulged in the overall neon graphics in Vaporwave that anime from back then just seems kind of fitting. I don't know if there's a solidified answer for why both elements fit together so well, and maybe we don't even need one. The only thing I can say at this point is that since both artistic entities have complemented each other since day one, and if people choose to maintain the pairing of these two, there may not be any need to ask further questions. Instead, we should just appreciate the aesthetics and allow our minds to warp into this colourful world and reminisce on those feel-good vibes that future funk continues to deliver. So now we know the origins of the name, when it began, and how the scene has progressed since its inception. But what if I told you we could go back even further than 2011, before Keats Collective or even Monotrix Point Never were precursors to the internet's new wave of plunderphonics? Because there was one other producer that could have been partly responsible for not just future funk, but possibly Vaporwave itself. You're probably thinking, Daydream, are you talking about Daft Punk because you know they don't count as future funk? And no. That's not who we're talking about. Though Daft Punk have a handful of bangers that some claim to be of that ilk due to the similarities in structure of songs like High Life and Superheroes, but they most definitely do not belong in that category. Who we're talking about right now is someone that many have admired and commended to be one of the earliest harbingers of future funk, The Phantom's Revenge. French producer The Phantom's Revenge has been a well-renowned name in the French house scene whose career dates as far back as the quote-unquote MySpace days. His influences stem from a plethora of highly acclaimed artists including Mr. Oizo, Paul Johnson, Breakboss, and Justice. The Phantom's Revenge would make his debut in 2008 with an 8-minute single known as Absolute Ego Riot, along with a remix of the track by Louis LaRoche through the now defunct Idiot House Records. Sampling Candy Staton's When You Wake Up Tomorrow, Absolute Ego Riot became the result of all the French house bangers that Phantom's Revenge had been listening to at the time and contained a variety of elements akin to the edifice of future funk. Stammering sample chops, groovy repetitions, auto-filtered build-ups and phases all compiled into one little package. Since then, the Phantom's Revenge has had the honour of performing in Japan, Australia, the United States and Mexico, as well as releasing a handful of EPs and singles on different platforms throughout the web with no history of any physical pressings. While his music is not future funk and fits more into the spectrum of French house, the Phantom's Revenge has affiliated with many artists and labels in Vaporwave that have also stated about how much his material has had an effect on them. In fact, he once contributed to Keats Collective at one point on Volume 5 of the label's compilation in 2014, alongside St. Pepsi and Macross 8299. He has also collaborated with Vaporwave valedictorian Peg Chennington on the Dewdropper album in late 2019 and even did an interview with Pad that same year. And just a few months ago, the Washington DC based Montam Records announced that the Phantom's Revenge would be releasing a single through their Bandcamp on the 1st of May dubbed Do Your Palms Ever Itch 2, which has been well received in the community. But just because the Phantom's Revenge doesn't blend into being in the same class as other future funk producers, doesn't mean that he has not been acknowledged for his involvement in the scene. I like to think of what he is to future funk as what Depeche Mode is to metal bands. Neither of them fitted into the same group as who they have influenced, but they both played a prominent role in the inspiration and expansion of the music that would later be preceded by them. However you choose to see it, it's hard to deny that some of the most unlikely figures can be the biggest inspirations to a certain field of media. I wouldn't go so far as to say the Phantom's Revenge is anything unordinary to future funk, as the roots to both examples trace back to a similar formula that multiple subgenres of house music have followed. But in the context of what this more energetic connection to Vaporwave has to offer, it's more about cutting out unnecessary fat and collecting the catchiest snippets one can find in the original track from the 80s, repackage it with updated production quality that can simultaneously fit into the sound of the 21st century, all the while being able to leave a nostalgic fingerprint on the newly revitalized song. The Phantom's Revenge couldn't possibly be the only name that others could identify with being a future funk forerunner, but he has certainly gained a reputation that producers from all over the world continue to admire and endorse. Whether you've been around since day one or are still fairly new to everything surrounding this melodic marvel, future funk has always been a treasure trove of earworms for music lovers abroad. From the bright and bubbly personality of Strawberry Station to the more industrial and metal-orientated disposition of Tokyo Wanderer, there's always something in the genre that will grab your attention with its sonic quality and fingerprint. Every person that has ever listened to this harmonious sensation has had an interpretation of their own when it comes to future funk. No matter how often each of us try to dissect it, there's always another piece of the puzzle to help complete the picture that showcases everything surrounding this entity. Nevertheless, it seems that every day someone is tampering with an old city pop, disco, or funk track that they found from a simple YouTube search, and that hundreds of ideas continue to spawn and inspire others to express their devotion to Vaporwave with the amount of subgenres in the scene. We as not just the audience, but also content creators strive to further understand and go through trial and error to adapt new ideas to the things that we enjoy, and do all that we can to entice more people into taking part and share their own appreciation with others. Thanks to the power of the internet and all the resources we have access to, people have managed to obtain a myriad of songs from underground record labels that many believed were long gone from ever resurfacing again. But luckily, not everything from the past will remain forgotten, and all it takes is one person to bring an artifact of yesteryear back to life. And what better place to share those rarities with everyone than on the internet? There also lies the question as to what could become of the hundreds upon thousands of Vaporwave records 20 years from now. Would albums like A Million Miles Away or Aloe Island Adventures be transformed much like the original compositions of which they were structured from? It's too soon to predict what kind of future awaits for the scene, but all we really need to take into account for now is to keep creating and experimenting with all the riches and treasures we continue to stumble upon. Maybe tomorrow we'll encounter a fresh release somewhere on Bandcamp that could prove to be revolutionary to the shape of future funk to come. Who knows what could happen? But for now, let's continue to indulge and create more of this wonderful music and hope that one day we'll all be in the same room to party with each other all night long.
Yeah, bro, fucking ready. I wanna be with you. I wanna be with you.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the foundation of what eventually became future funk. It's pretty crazy to know how far this genre has come ever since its first inception, but the fact that it's still going on to this day and people are getting more experimental with it, it's just astounding. I may do another video further analysing the genre, but for now I'm quite happy with how this one's turned out. But nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and are willing to stick around for more videos in the future, because there's plenty more Daydream Deluxe to come. There's plenty more videos all about Vaporwave to come. So I hope to see more of you guys in these videos very soon. But until then, big love from your boy down under, Daydream Deluxe.